This podcast represents the individual opinions of Dr. Dmitry Bick, Dr. Stefan de Graaf, and the guests. It should not be taken as medical advice or an establishment of standard of care. No guarantee is given regarding the accuracy of any statements. Please consult your healthcare professional for any medical questions.
Morant meeting with Adam Silver. Therapy is something to that effect. Therapy is concluded. He will be back in 8 games, whatever. So I'm like, what kind of therapy happens in a week? But it does sound like you went to Florida, got treatment, and it's done.
we don't want to be cynical about this, but how can you not be?
Right. I mean, he's not saying it, but if you want to be analytical, he's saying indirectly that if the video had not been public, I would have not have done therapy. Oh crap, the video's out. I gotta do therapy now. So
I don't know. It comes across that way, doesn't it?
I was going to actually start this episode pointing out that we're recording on Mother's Day evening, and that I came across a poll that 58% of mothers on Mother's Day want just free time and want to be actually to just drop everything and just not want to do anything on Mother's Day.
Wait, so they don't want flowers? They don't want being cooked for?
No. They just, like, what do you want to do on Mother's Day? And they just want to do nothing and they just want free time. And
basically,
you're
saying
the irony of that for me is that they're so burned out on the other 364 days of being a mother that on the one day of the year that they're actually celebrated for doing all of those things that they do on those other 364 days, that they don't want to do any behaviors that make them the person that they are being celebrated for on that one day. That's the irony.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, ironically, on Mother's Day, mothers don't want to be mothers.
That's exactly
right. Facetious way of saying it. And it makes sense because what do people do, right? On Mother's Day, they tell mom, don't do anything, sit tight, we're cooking.
That's right.
You get flowers.
So on Mother's Day, the day we celebrate mom, don't be a mom because you're so burned out from being a mom every other day.
Right. Put your feet up. Don't worry about laundry, about cooking, about the kids. Everything's going to be all right. Oh, not all right.
So we were going to talk about that for 5 minutes, but then John Morant had to go.
Oh, boy. Don't get me started, man.
And post another Instagram live video with him and a gun. After a few weeks ago, just did literally the entire episode was on him and nothing else. We usually have 2 segments in our podcast. We had an entire podcast on him and his mental health. And that clip that you just heard at the beginning of this was a couple of clips from that episode of us talking about the interview he did with Jalen Rose. And so I know you've got something to say about this, so I'm just going to let you cook. You go ahead and cook.
I'm going to go, stop me because I may go really, really deep down in the rabbit hole. Okay. So put me on a timer.
No. You go, you cook. You go.
You guys don't see me. I'm a black man in America, right? And, a few episodes ago, I might have had a different stance with Ja Morant. I might have been a bit critical, but I might have been a bit understanding. I think I may have said, he's young, he's going to grow. That's mostly the popular defense that he was having last week. But apparently, since I just came back from a conference shout out to Morehouse School of Medicine, which is, one of the historically black college in America, where we were a concentration of black people and excellence black people, right? People that did well for the community, people that are trying to be leaders and be role models for the black folks in America. the positive about that, about our people. And here I am coming back home and checking my phone and saying, somebody who could say is a prominent figure in America, a prominent black figure in America, doing the same, I don't know, BS that he's been doing that, for the past year, and what he got cut up for a few weeks ago, a few months ago. So my beef is that it's just infuriating. It's, demoralizing that there's so many folks out there trying to do well, trying to put a good example, trying to uplift the black people and trying to put the best, example forward. Not that we should have, but we're doing it, right? And then people like Morant just trash it, just doesn't even care about it, right? He doesn't even care. He had a stunt about mental health, that he was going to go to counseling in Florida, but this is all BS. He just, for him, it looks like it's so trivial. For him, it looks like it's so unimportant to be a role model for the youth, for the black youth, right? He just look like he's got his bag, he's got his money, and nothing else matters. Like, he doesn't care about his legacy, doesn't care about the example he's setting forth. So my anger right now is that there's so little of us doing right things in the light shining on, right? It's so hard to find good publicity for people that are doing great things. But the threshold for the bad things that superstars, celebrities, and black communities are doing is so low. So you have the spotlight on you. Why are you making it hard for your people to advance, or for people to actually be uplifted? So it might be unfair that a whole population be characterized as thug because one guy did something stupid. That is totally unfair. But at the same time, why would you put yourself in that position? Why would you give that, why would you throw that bone to the people that criticize our people, right? Why make it so easier for them? And to me, it's just infuriating. You have a position of power to put forth good in us, right? Black people. Why are you just trashing it? And that's my rant. But I just want to go say something I regret later. But it's, to me, just infuriating. As a black person, when I read it, I was so furious. I felt like he was pulling everybody down. He was pulling everybody who's doing something great. He's pulling him down. Like, dude, we can have you on the news, on CNN or Fox News or ESPN flashing guns, We can't have that. We can't have that, because that's going to be what people use to, further trash us. So it's just demoralizing, man. Forget about the mental health part. I'm going to take a seat. I'm going to pass this turn. I'm not going to talk about mental health about Ja Morant. He had that opportunity last time we talked about him. He went to counseling, supposedly. I don't think this time around he deserves any of my breath talking about his mental health.
Well, we're not going to. I'm just going to point out, and I am not in a position to answer or speak to anything you said. What I'm just going to say is, look, he used mental health as a thing last time.
As an excuse.
I don't know that we're going to give him that leeway this time. Although, look, maybe he is going through something. I don't know. But I think he's going to need a little bit. I think he's going to need a little bit more than a week this time.
Right. That's the last I'm going to say. He should have no reason, no excuse not to have the proper care that he should have, or the proper people around him. He's got enough access. He's got enough money. He's got enough lawyers and agents to put him in the right position, to give him good counseling or provide him good therapists or psychiatrists. There's no reason for him not to have the right help around him. Some folks out there don't have what he has, and they have to deal with community mental health centers. God knows how difficult that is. So he has no excuse to be talking about mental health, knowing that he has so much money at his disposal, so much access at his disposal. So there's no excuse whatsoever.
But I think he was just using it to. It's one of those things that people use this as a. If you bring up mental health, like, you just can't question it. It's one of those things where it's like,
right? It's
my mental health.
Don't criticize me.
It's mental health. You can't criticize me anymore now. I think he was using it as that, and
that's unfair.
It's unfair to people that actually have
mental health. Exactly. It's unfair.
It's unfair to those people. Yeah. So that's all we're going to say about that. We just wanted to bring that back up because we literally did an entire thing on it.
Dude, if you're listening, somebody can ask me, dude, come on, man. Come on. Don't tell me about your environment, about your posse, about your clique. Get some help and get off social media, man. Jesus.
I don't know who's taking those videos, man. But
yeah, they're not friends. I know they're not friends. I don't know what he calls them, but they're not friends.
Okay, so we're gonna move on to something positive, right?
Yeah, let's do that.
This may be the best string of sports in the history of South Florida. I know I'm over 40 years old. I don't remember a string of sports in South Florida. And again, we're a South Florida based show for people that are not in Florida that are downloading us. And you are doing it because we see you out there. Thank you. And keep going. In South Florida, we have not had a string like this before. The Panthers have made it to the Stanley Cup Finals, but at that time, the Heat had not made a run like this before, and the Dolphins stunk. They were mediocre at best. And the Marlins were a year or two away from their World Series. When the Marlins made it to the World Series, the Panthers stunk, and the Heat didn't make a deep run. They were eliminated, I believe, by the Knicks in 97. When the Marlins won their World Series in 2003, the Panthers were terrible. The Heat still had not become the culture and the consistent winner that they were yet. They were still being eliminated by the Knicks on a consistent basis. And the Dolphins were mired in mediocrity. I think Ricky Williams was about to retire for the first time, and they were being eliminated in the first round of the playoffs. So this run that the Heat and the Panthers have had, and the way that they are doing it as 8 seeds where nobody gave them a chance, gives us a chance to talk about something in mental health and sports, mental toughness and perseverance. And it's an incredible thing these guys are doing. The Panthers came back from 3-1 against the greatest hockey team ever in the history of hockey. The Heat beat the Bucks, which had the best record in the NBA, and they didn't.
Yeah, the MVP
down, and the MVP, and we had a podcast on him. And then they go and they beat the Knicks, a hated rival. And they, if you ask me, they beat the refs too in the last game, but whatever. That's
a different. That's a different episode. Yeah,
it's a different episode.
What's his name? Scott Foster. Shout out to Scott Foster.
Shout out to Scott Foster, the extender. And and the Panthers went and they beat the Maple Leafs, who are a good team, and they beat them in 5 games where nobody thought that they could beat Toronto, and they handily beat Toronto. 2 of them were in overtime, but still, like the Panthers have won 7 straight overtime games in the playoffs dating back to last year, which is an incredible streak.
Being an 8th seed in sports, you have everybody against you. You have people that are bettors, professional bettors, people that know, I'm going to say, in parentheses, know what they're doing, betting. They use stats and odds, and they put money against you. You have the fans that say, I'm going to cut myself in it. I say, we're not going to go to the final, right? And we have the entire sports world saying the Heat won't do this, the Panthers won't do this, they're 8th seed, they're lucky they get to the first round. So you get all these naysayers and all these negative, notes or vibes around you, and you go through that. You go through it seems, and you go through everybody's discounting you, and you make it even further than people thought you were going. So they're going to end up both teams, to the conference final when people were actually writing them off the playoff completely. So
that's right.
Yeah.
And they're underdogs again.
Toughness, I don't know what that is. Right. Yeah, they're still underdogs.
They're still underdogs. The Celtics won today. They beat Doc Rivers, and we're going to talk about Doc Rivers in the next segment when we talk about coaches. But that was as predictable as the sun coming up in the morning. Yes, so the Heat are going to be underdogs to the Celtics, and the Panthers are going to be underdogs to the Carolina Hurricanes.
Hey, listen, that might be a good thing. That might be a good thing because we're going to talk about mental toughness. I'm sure we're going to talk about resilience, right? And so, yeah, keep us, keep cutting us out, right? So it might be a good thing.
Damn right. So let's talk about mental toughness.
I mean, I'm sure it's been around, but never defined in the past.
Well, the thing about the definitions is that the early conceptualizations of it, back in 82 and 86, is when they sort of kind of started to conceptualize it. The early research, they found that 50% of athlete success was the mental ability contributed to athlete success, 50%.
Right.
And in the same year, 87, this particular study in wrestling, wrestling coaches rated it as 82%, which is a crazy stat. I never considered wrestling that 80% would be that high. And there's never a real set of definitions. But,
I was going to say, right.
But over the years, they've had all of these kind of characteristics, and they've, had one study had 7 characteristics, one study had 30 characteristics. Go ahead, but I'm going to find the one definition that I found. But
I was going to say, so I think the issue, and I've done some readings on it. I think the not a problem, but the complexity of defining mental toughness is that the definition is very wide. It's very subjective, right? It might mean something different to that organization or this coach or this mental toughness coach, and mean something completely different to that player. I'm sure you're going to have something more specific, but mental toughness could be the ability of a player to get back up, right? To go through failures, but still be having a goal in mind, and still, like Janice said last couple of weeks, we had an episode, like, failure is part of sports. So if you are not mentally tough enough, you're going to let the failures drag you down. So being mentally tough is accepting the quote unquote failures, and keeping your goal, keeping your north in front of you, and go with your resilience and go forward toward that goal. And I think in sports, there's I'll challenge you of telling me one sport icon or one sport team that has been only successful. That doesn't exist. So those that have won, they've lost before, and I would argue they got better after the loss. So that's that resilience part, and that's keeping your north always forward and always working with consistency and not letting things like losses and defeat keeping you down. So, but I'm sure because it's so wide, the definition is so wide, it's been difficult to have measurements, right? Systematic measurements to measure how do you compare this player to that player when it comes to mental toughness. So I think that's where the definition is a little bit shaky. And I know throughout the years they've tried to make it a set definition.
Well, the problem is, even if you define it, the terminology is subjective. So, for instance, in 2002, this is how they had a proposed definition.
Right.
Mental toughness is having the natural or developed psychological edge that enables athletes to, 1, generally cope better than the opponents with the many sports demands, competition, training, lifestyle. 2, specifically more consistent and better than the opponents in staying determined, focused, confident, and in control under pressure. Tell me all of that isn't subjective, right? Like, how do you determine what focus?
It's right.
Confident. What is confident? How am I more confident than you are? I mean, look, listen to Matthew Tkachuk speak in a post-game press conference.
Right.
after game 4, the game that the Panthers lost against Toronto. Did he seem any more or less confident than Auston Matthews did? Against the Leafs, and what happened in game 5, the Panthers won. So, you know what I mean? Like, these things are very subjective, but people are saying that the Toronto wasn't tough enough. You hear this on Twitter a lot.
I'll give you an example. Jimmy Butler, when he speaks to the media, he always says, I've never seen him say that he's going to lose. He always say, we're going to win. We will win a championship. We will win the next game. We will win game 7. Always says that. This guy is confident beyond measures. Compare him to Nick's favorite. I'm being funny now. Compare him to Julius Randle. That guy, when he goes on the media, he just mope and soap and he's down and out, and he says things like, maybe the Heat want it more than us.
Oh,
so you'll be telling me, right? He said that publicly.
I should have clipped that. Yeah, we should have.
You should have clipped that. So subjectively, I could say, I think comparing those two players, I could say Jimmy Butler seems to be better or more mentally tough than Julius Randle is, because you won't ever hear Jimmy Butler conceding that the Knicks want it more than he does. Right?
Stephen A. Smith pointed this out, actually. He pointed out that when Julius Randle's shot is not falling, he mopes,
you see that.
he whines, his body language slumps.
Right.
Is that a mental toughness kind of thing? Well,
I would argue yes. I would argue that. Yeah.
You might. I mean, look, here's a definition from 2009. Kelly, who created a personal construct psychology of mental toughness, proposed this definition. And you decide whether or not this is a good definition. Quote, a collection of experientially developed and inherent sport-specific and sport-general values, attitudes, behaviors, and emotions that influence the way in which an individual approaches, responds to, and appraises both negatively and positively construed pressures, challenges, and adversities to consistently achieve his or her goals. Doesn't that sound like Julius Randle, right?
Yeah.
That sounds exactly like him, right?
Exactly.
So sports general values, attitudes, behaviors, emotions influence the way in which the individual approaches, responds to, and appraises both negatively and positively construed pressures. That sounds just like him, right? So when his shot doesn't fall, he mopes. He doesn't get back on defense. Whereas Jimmy Butler's shot doesn't fall, he just goes back and he shoots another one.
Right.
Right? Right. And, we're picking on Julius Randle only because he's a Knick and I hate the Knicks.
He's a good example. He's a good example.
Yes, also a good example. But yeah. And I'm not the only one picking on it. Stephen A. Smith is the biggest Knicks fan on the planet. And
you don't have to be. You don't have to be a critic on TV to see it. The guy, his body language tells you that he's got some confidence issue. Yeah. There's a reason that Julius Randle plays better at home than away. When he plays for the Knicks, he'll score 20 plus points. When he plays away, you can guarantee that he's not going to score as much. So I'm not sure it's because the environment that he plays in reinforce, his self confidence or self esteem. One could argue that he needs to hear the chance to feel better or to feel like he's capable. But Knicks fans are not that. They're not that nice. So
no,
I'm not sure what he's going to do. I'm not sure, because if he's going to stay in with the Knicks and he doesn't have a good psychological coach or psychiatrist, on the team, he's going to have to work on his mental toughness to stay with New York. Yeah.
Let me play Eric Spoelstra talking about the Heat and the Heat's mental toughness here real quick.
Yeah.
Having to go through the play-in, it feels like we're going. Feels like this was the finish of our second round series because of that play-in. But for whatever reason, and this is what you always hope for, all these experiences have brought this team closer together, more connected, and yes, down the stretch, it was just. An example of a lot of the adversity and fortitude that we've had to show. Guys getting in foul trouble. It was just one after another. When Caleb went out, then Bam, and then Kyle. We're just able to stay stable, stay the course. Our guys are extremely mentally tough.
He's talking about injuries, one after another. And our guys are staying stable. And that was the definition of mental toughness, is the adversity, overcoming that. And then I'm going to play Matthew Tkachuk talking about, Keith Tkachuk is Matthew Tkachuk's awesome dad. Matthew Tkachuk talking about the belief that they could beat the Bruins. And yes, I realize this is a very South Florida centric. These things are very South Florida centric. You're going to have to get over this. I'm actually going to play JJ Redick talking about Akeem Olajuwon here in a second, but right now we're going to revel in the Panthers and the Heat. So this is Matthew Tkachuk talking about beating the Bruins.
You've been very confident all season and emphasized the belief that you have in this team. Just how would you describe that belief late in the third period and then in overtime?
Yeah, belief was there, and then once we got to overtime, I think we took over overtime like we did in Game 5. Like, both overtime games we've played, I think we've been the better team, like the way better team in that. So, yeah, it's just, I mean, like, let's be honest, nobody in the whole world thought we were going to win this series except for the guys in that room. So, it's pretty cool feeling right now.
Nobody in the world thought we were going to win except the guys in that room, right? It's the belief, the confidence.
It's almost like I wouldn't say impossible, but irrational belief. You have to believe, despite the odds, despite the naysayers, you have to, because if you really believe in what they say, then your performance, you play like you have no confidence. You play like you already lost. So yes, I guess those clips summarize exactly what mental toughness is. Despite everything, despite injuries, despite what people are saying, despite the circumstances, you still go through it all, and you play like you want to win, and you will win until you do.
Yeah. So I want to say that the Spoelstra clip is courtesy of NBA TV, and the Kachuk clip is courtesy of the Florida Panthers.
Let me just add something. I've always heard people say, like, coaches actually says all the time. Right now, nobody comes to mind, but they always say physical attributes, physical athletes are everywhere. That's why people are playing basketball at Walker's Park in New York. Others are playing with the Harlem Globetrotters, and others are playing in the NBA, because there's that element. Forget about the physical attributes, the talent. Forget about the physical fitness, but that one element of mental toughness, or of being methodical about your training, being very consistent with your training throughout the years, that separate the superstars or the professional athletes from the rest of the people out there playing basketball, semi-pro.
That's right. Yeah, and resilience has something to do with it. It's the ability to continue and continue and persevere after failure and failure and failure. Right. It's what Giannis was talking about when we were talking about him. Right. Just the after failure to failure. I'm going to play JJ Redick here talking about Hakeem Olajuwon and his journey. And this is from JJ Redick does a podcast called The Old Man and the Three podcast. And that's what this is from. And he's talking about Hakeem Olajuwon. For those that are old enough to remember Hakeem Olajuwon, he won 2 NBA championships, but it took him a really long time. And this is JJ Redick running through his career and what it took to get there.
I just want to take you through part of his career. 1985, the Houston Rockets lose 3-2 to Utah in the first round. 1986, they lose in the NBA Finals. 1987, they lose 4-2 to Seattle in the second round. In 1988, they lose in the first round to Dallas. In 89, they lose in the first round to Seattle. In 1990, they lose in the first round to the Lakers. In 1991, swept by the Lakers in the first round. 92, they don't even make the playoffs. 93, they lose 4-3 to Seattle in the second round. 1994, he's a champion. 1995, he's a champion. 31 and 32 years old. You go through all of this. LeBron, 27 when he first won. Steph, 27 when he first won. Jordan, 28 when he first won. Kobe, 30 when he first won a championship without Shaq. These things take time. It's part of the journey. It's part of the arc. Enjoy it.
Perseverance, part of toughness, right? Could you imagine Hakeem Olajuwon went through all those years and he could have just been like, it's not going to happen. But, he saw an opportunity. Jordan retired. He saw an opportunity, and that was his opportunity. People say...
You've lost. Yeah.
Jordan didn't retire. He probably would have won. But you know what? He did. And other people... He
did. It doesn't matter. No, it doesn't matter. No, exactly. He was the one who won. What about the other people? He didn't win.
The other people didn't win that year. So, and it takes a while, and you got to keep fighting, and that's the perseverance. That's part of the response to the failure over time.
Yeah, he could have quit. He could have said, "Jesus, I'm not going to win. I'm going to stop trying," and he could have just stopped and be demoralized.
you see all the head coaches that have been fired this year in the last week?
I'd like to read the contracts, man. Like, I'm so eager to read the contracts because I don't know. Can you imagine if people get fired like that easily in real world?
Look, I don't have a problem with people getting fired, with coaches getting fired. The issue here is that these coaches were like coaches of the year.
They're great coaches. They're really good coaches.
Mike, who's fired? It was, I'm looking at this list. It was Budenholzer, right?
Right.
Won a championship 2 years
He
ago.
also won Coach of the Year.
And he was Coach of the Year
last year?
He would in 18 to 19 and 19.
19.
And then Monty Williams was just fired yesterday. And he was Coach of the Year last year, the year before last year.
Yeah, last year. And he went to the finals.
The finals. Nick Nurse was fired. And he won a championship.
He got a championship.
And he was Coach of the Year the year he won the championship, right?
But no, he got the championship in 2019 and the following year.
And
they kept him, obviously. So, you see the irony? He won a Coach of the Year in 2019. Obviously, they kept him on salary. And the year after that, he won a championship.
He won a championship, and then he was fired. And then D'Antoni was fired. Vogel was fired, and he won a championship with the Lakers in the bubble.
Right. Well, D'Antoni has been fired a lot in his career, like a few times.
Correct. But he also won a Coach of the Year in 2017 with Houston.
Right.
And Toronto was fired 2 Coaches of the Year with them.
Dwayne Casey.
Dwayne Casey, too.
Casey or Dwayne Casey, yeah.
So the next one on the list was Tom Thibodeau. Tom Thibodeau was one Coach of the Year, so he's next on the chopping block.
That's a fair prediction. That's a fair prediction.
The point I'm trying to make here is, and also Mike Brown, who won Coach of the Year.
Who won this year?
Who won this year? So you guys are on the hot seat,
right?
But the point I'm trying to make here is
somebody said that. I think who said was Doc Rivers said actually yesterday. I think he said his advice to coaches, is to not win Coach of the Year. Was it Doc Rivers said that? One of the people said that.
That's great advice because you're going to be fired.
Do not win it.
Also, Doc Rivers' advice is don't be up 3-1 in series in the playoffs. That's also Doc Rivers'
advice.
Because you're gonna blow it. But
you're gonna blow it. Yeah.
The point here is, where do you see in the public someone who wins Employee of the Year in whatever field that they win, in whatever field that they're in, and then the next year or the year after, or even they win Employee of the Year, and also then the greatest achievement that they can achieve in their field, and also Employee of the Year in the field, whatever job that they do, and then the year after that, gone. Sorry, thank you for your service. See you later. Where do you have that?
A lot of time in the real world, a lot of time, depending on the contracts, obviously, but a lot of time people go to litigation because for wrongful termination, right? A lot of time people say, I don't know why I'm getting fired, and the lawyer says, listen, you should have been on probation. You should have been told that you're on probation. You should have been told, preemptively what you were doing wrong. So they fired you. You can't be fired without knowing what you're doing wrong.
You're doing poor performance. Poor performance.
Somebody have to tell you you put on probation, right? Or they tell you, listen, if you keep going that route, we won't retain you, right? They write you up a few times, a couple of times, a third time, and that's how you're terminated. That's how it should be, I believe. But I don't know when you go into the world of sports and you get contract for $5 million a year. I don't know actually how much you get paid, but you get contract, you get salaries like that. And I'm not sure what the contracts say that they can be fired with no cause. I mean, I would sign that contract. Don't get me wrong.
Well, any contract has that. Like, insurance contracts have that. Like, I'm in private practice, and my insurance contract says the contract can be terminated without cause. And so...
Well, there's also wrongful termination sometimes.
No, not contract. I mean, you can litigate, but the contract says can be terminated by either party. I can terminate it too if I want to.
Yeah.
So,
but I think I think we're drifting away into the legality of it. But I think, honestly, in sports, I don't think it's about performance. Forget about the performance.
But of course it is. They're firing him because they're firing these guys because they lost in the playoff.
No.
So here's my hot take. Here's what I think is going on.
So the coach is not playing on the floor. They cannot fire the player. They cannot fire the superstar.
Okay, so your take is that the reason they're firing the coach is because they can't fire the players?
The reason they're firing the coach is because they have to point the finger at somebody to appease the fan. There's got to be change. You cannot. I mean, I'm guessing in the owners or GM mindset, they cannot show up next year with the same coach and the same team. Something has to give. Either you terminate your players, which you cannot do, or trade them, which you cannot do right now, or you say, hey, sorry, you're gonna have to take the fall. You know what you're signed up for. You know,
but it's a contradictory thing, right? You're like, oh, the coach is so great, he won Coach of the Year, and now he's terrible. I kind of get rid of him. But that's so stupid, right? That's ridiculous.
Precisely, the irony is precisely that's how unfair it is.
Here's what I think is happening.
That's how crazy he is.
Here's the psychology of what I think is happening here. I'll tell you exactly what's happening. This is a classic Dmitry knows all. This is what my wife says. Dmitry, you think you know everything. I know exactly what's happening. Let me tell you exactly what's happening. Coach of the Year is an overachievement award. Okay? That's what Coach of the Year is. It's nothing more than that. It's when a team is expected to do nothing, and then they overachieve, and then they give the coach that award because the team wasn't expected to do what they did. And then it's like, oh my God, look at these crappy players that this coach put together and did all of these great things. And he must be a fantastic coach. We're going to give him Coach of the Year because we didn't expect this bunch of scrubs to put it together like this. And they did it. And therefore it must be this coach because we didn't think these guys could do this. That's what's happening.
Eric Spoelstra should be Coach of the Year every year. That's what you're saying. If the guy's playing with undrafted players, with bench players every single year.
Actually, I do think that. But
okay,
I do think that it's the same. It's the same thing that LeBron should be MVP every year, but you're not going to give LeBron MVP every year because it's boring. Jordan should have been MVP every year, but they stopped doing it after like 4 years in a row because it's like, yeah, we get Jordan, of course, is the MVP, but let's give it to someone else because if we keep giving it to Jordan, like it's boring. Like we understand that Jordan is the MVP. We get LeBron as the MVP every year. Like, you take LeBron off of the Lakers are a lottery team. Do you understand? Yeah. Of course, he's the MVP, but we can't give it to LeBron every year. So yes, it's the most valuable player. LeBron is literally the most valuable player in the NBA every year. There is nobody else. I'm sorry, Giannis, you're not the most valuable player.
He took Cleveland and won a championship with them, so yeah.
Yes, he's the most valuable player. LeBron is, okay? So, yes, Spoelstra should be Coach of the Year every year. Okay, and I'm not even saying, I'm a Heat fan, I know I'm biased, whatever. Like, screw you.
But he should. He should be. Playing with scrubs, playing with undrafted players.
But back to my point. So it's an overachievement award. So we didn't expect you to do this. You did it. We're going to give you Coach of the Year. Now, why do they get fired? Okay, so now we think you're some genius that took a bunch of scrubs and turned them into this great group of players. Great. Now you got expectations, bub. Right? Now we expect you to do something with these guys. Look at you, genius man. And now you want a championship. Some of them do, some of them don't. Right? Now you want a championship. You must be a genius. And we realize that you got a good player. Right? You know, Nick Nurse had Kawhi, I think. Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Kawhi, yeah. And Larry.
Budenholzer has Giannis. Vogel, he won with LeBron, right? So these guys, now you got a great player, right? So now you got expectations, right? So now you got expectations. And now you go into the playoffs and you don't win. So now what happens? We had expectations for you, genius man. What happened? You blew it. And now we're mad at you not at the players, at you, because we thought you were a genius, but clearly you're not a genius.
Yeah.
And now you're fired. That's what's going on here. It's the burden of overachievement, and then expectations, and then the underachievement, because he was never a genius, and he overachieved because sports is about luck. Sports is about luck and opportunity, and things happen. And I got a clip about JJ Redick and that too. But
I get it. But likewise, they should have a award for worst coach of the year, because some coaches are effing bad. But you made me think about something that, Steve Kerr, there was a season Steve Kerr had Steph Curry, he had Klay Thompson, he had Draymond Green, he had a great team. The team that won, I forgot how many games, like 68 games, something like that, I forgot.
72.
Or 73,
games they won the year. Actually, they won 73.
And the following year, Steve Kerr had a back injury. He couldn't coach 3/4 of the season. Luke Walton, which was like retired a few years prior and was on the coaching staff, became the coach for the season. Meaning, Steve Kerr did not coach, maybe a quarter of the season. He still won coach of the year, by the way, because the team had a incredible season. So Steve Kerr not coaching, won coach of the year. My point is, the players are the reason the team either loses or the team wins. The coach actually he's there as a facilitator.
Well, okay. Well, then Spoelstra shouldn't ever win coach of the year then.
No. There's level to it. Spoelstra has nobody. He shouldn't be playing in the playoff. They should not be in the playoff right now.
So he's done something, right?
He's done something, right?
Okay.
But you cannot compare the team that the Heat have right now to the team that, Golden State have, or the Bucks have, or for that matter,
No, look, a basketball coach does a lot more than. I mean, look, you're making my point for me. Actually, is the players do a lot, but it's the burden of overachieving, because the idea that what you think you have, because the analysts and the talking heads say, well, these guys stink, but they're actually a lot better than you think they are. And they coalesce and get together in a team. And now they're saying, well, it must be the coach that put all these guys together. And now there's this expectation, but maybe these guys just had a good year, or they just weren't as good as you think they are, or they just overachieved. And now you think the coach is the one that helped put them together. And then the coach overachieved. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because it's a expectations versus reality thing. And now you've got this guy, and this goes beyond sports, and it's something that I do with patients in my office too. It leads to happiness. It's a happiness equation. If you got a guy who you think is a genius coach or a good coach, and you think he won a championship, he's a star coach, he's got coach of the year, and then he comes in and the next year he just doesn't do it, or he appears to screw it up like Budenholzer did, where he didn't put his best big man in against Jimmy Butler.
Yeah.
Your reality is less than your is lower than your expectations, and
so
you're
fine. So what I understand what you're saying. What I don't really like is that for an owner or for a general manager, their coach seems to be really good this year and really bad the following year. At least give him a couple of years. If Pat Riley was not that patient with Spoelstra, he would have been fired it was different GM, would have been fired. There's no doubt.
Yeah.
Spoelstra would have been fired with the big three.
Yeah.
But they stuck with them. They believe in him. They empowered him. They let him do his thing, because, like Janice said, failure is part of the journey. Or not failure, but let's say loss is a part of the journey. So my point is, it seems to me, the way it looks like, when the team wins, everybody's great. The coach is great. The MVP is good. Everybody's good. But when the team loses, the first finger you can point at is your coach. We got to do something. Because the fans are upset. Let's fire the coach. Right? This is the easiest way. To me, it's like it's more of a PR management thing than the actual X's and O's in coaching thing. Some coaches are really, really bad. Some coaches are bad because, they're really bad. They always put on the league or whatever. But there's 30 coaches in the league. 30 coaches. They cannot all be, MVP or coach of the year. One has to be coach of the year because they're good. That warrants them a few following years to prove themselves.
How many years?
I don't know, but I would even go further. I wonder. I know there's an NBA Player Association. I wonder if there's a coach association, because there should be some bylaws that if you win coach of the year, because I'm gonna give you my reasoning. The players, when they win awards, they get accepted into possibly getting a max contract. So, for example, Morant, his name comes up again. He won't be eligible for max contract next year because he did not make first NBA team, or any NBA team for that matter. So my point is, awards do matter for contract issues, for contract, details and salary, implication. For the coaches, I don't understand why coaching of the year should not protect you for following year, at least one following year. If I win coach of the year, I should have at least 1 or 2 years protected. If not, that award is bananas. It's just a piece of paper.
It is meaningless.
It's meaningless. So you get my point, right? Why do awards have meaning for players, for the salary in the contract, and for the coaches it doesn't mean anything? Like, I can win
because it's a players' league,
and next I get fired.
It's a players' league. It's always been a players' league. So okay, so you're the GM. Fine.
So you get my point for me.
You're the GM of the Bucks. What do you do this year? You lost to the 8th seed Heat on a play where Brook Lopez should have been in the game, and Jimmy Butler doesn't make that play, and they win Game 5. They go back to Miami.
There's ways about it. If I was a GM, I would hate to have rumors or whatnot. I would, in a press conference, I would actually say it out loud that Giannis was injured. That's one of the reasons that we lost a game or two. And the coach needs to prove himself next year. No, but as a GM, I would say it. I would say it. I'll say our coach needs to prove himself next year. And our coach should be on a we will see basis. Let's evaluate. Let's not overreact. Let's see if it's not progress next year. Then we'll touch this contract, further.
And if I'm the owner, I fire you. Because that's nonsense.
But there's no wrong in saying that our coach needs to prove himself. There's no wrong in saying that. At least the expectation is there. But there's no wrong in saying Mike Budenholzer needs to, prove himself. And by the way, parentheses, did you know that during the series his brother died? Did you read that?
Yeah, I know that.
His brother died in a car accident.
Yeah, I know that.
I'm just saying. There's a few things that he did not do during the series. He didn't do any adjustments. He never double teamed Jimmy. I'm not saying that's the reason he didn't do it. I'm saying there's a possibility. It's not unfathomable that his head was not in the game because he was seeing his brother dying in a car accident. It's not impossible. So because of that, you cannot, as a team. Well, if I was a PR guy for the team, I'd say, I think it's the wrong time to fire the coach right now. His brother just died in a car accident.
And Monty Williams?
That's what I would have said.
Monty Williams,
who
hasn't
he's
won
a great
anything.
Coach.
Who hasn't won anything.
He's a great coach.
He went to the finals.
He's a great coach.
He lost. He lost this year with Kevin Durant, Chris Paul, Devin Booker.
No. So fair enough. They give him time. When did he win the Coach of the Year last year? He won last year, right? Coach of the Year. I think he did.
Was it last year? Might have been.
Possibly. Yeah.
I gotta look it up again.
Yeah, Monty Williams won in 2022, Coach of the Year.
Okay.
So, and then now you give him Kevin Durant, you give him Booker, and they don't win, then that's a fair argument. You cannot have Kevin Durant and not go further than that. I agree. That's a compelling argument. Like you won Coach of the Year last year, and then I give you one of the best players in the league, and you still cannot go over the hump. That's a fair argument.
Okay, so Monty Williams, you would fire.
I wouldn't fire him, but I would understand why he would get fired. I would understand. You can't not win more with Kevin Durant.
Okay, so we have come to an agreement, but I still think it's and the reason I bring it up is because from a mental health perspective, I tell my patients, if your reality doesn't meet your expectations, you're going to be unhappy. And I think that's sort of what's happening here a little bit is when reality doesn't meet expectations, it's the happiness equation. Reality divided by expectations or reality minus expectations. Your expectations are way up high, just really, really high. And they're not going to be, you're just, if you think you're going to be a billionaire and, you have a job at Publix, you know what I mean? And you don't have a realistic way of getting there, you're going to generally be unhappy unless you're psychotic. But you know what I mean? Like there has to be a tempering of expectations to measure reality, or else you're going to end up unhappy. And a lot of the times the people come in and they're complaining about being unhappy and they're looking for an antidepressant to make them happy. Yeah. It's a matter of situational expectation management here. That's what I think is happening here with these coaches is, look, Budenholzer was supposed to beat the 8th seed. That was the expectation. And they lost to Jimmy Butler. And they didn't. And that's why I'm worried for Tom Thibodeau. Because everyone in New York was expecting to beat the Heat, and they shouldn't have expected it. But they were.
My words, it's either going to be Thibodeau out or that's fine.
Thibodeau or who's the other one? That's it's Mike Brown.
It's either Thibodeau or
Mike Brown, I think, is going to have a leash because Sacramento was the most exciting team this year. I think he's going to have a leash because what he's
going to have a couple of years.
He's going to have some years.
You're making my point.
That's right. He's going to have a couple of years. Because next year, they just ran into Golden State. Golden State, they should have beaten Golden State.
And it was a great series. It was a great series.
They have the best offense in the league. He's gonna but
there were no blowouts. Dr. Rivers. There were no blowouts.
But if they don't win next year, we may be having a show on this next year about Mike Brown.
Ultimately, these coaches will be fine, man. Like they have enough money to to cry and dry their tears with.
Come on,
they'll be fine. Their ego might be hurt, but they'll be fine.
We're talking about regular people here. Can you imagine if you won Doctor of the Year? Doctor of the Year.
Following year, I got fired.
And you won there is no doctor award for champion. There's no championship for doctoring.
No, but you get an award like in any chapter, like let's say Florida, whatever chapter of psychiatry, whatever it is. Doctor of the Year, whatever.
And then your hospital just fired you the next year just because, you didn't bring in enough money for the hospital or something. You're like, sorry, Steph, you underperformed our collections this year. Thanks for your service. And you can go take that trophy and put it on your wall.
Hang it somewhere else. Hang it in a different hospital.
Go hang it in the other hospital's office. Like, come on, man. Like, that's so ridiculous.
That's tough.
It's ridiculous. And then some guy in a podcast is like, well, he's a doctor. He makes plenty of money. He can go cry in his bank account.
Day full of hiccups? Need a shake-up? Listen up. It's Dr. Bick and Dr. DeGraff's Mental Health Tip of the Day.
Alrighty then. Mental Health Tip of the Day. Brought to you by absolutely nobody. Once again. But we're always looking forward to somebody picking up the slack for us. Don't forget to like and subscribe and follow and rate us. And give us feedback. Answer the questions on Spotify.
If we're not going to get sponsored, if nobody will sponsor us, our listeners will actually rate us and that could help us.
Yes, and tell us what you think. Tell us that you hate us. It's fine. Tell us what you want changed. We're always up for positive and negative feedback so that we can be better. Yeah. But anyway,
and if you like it, share it. Also share it.
That's right. If you like it, share it. Hit us up on Twitter, Psych Effect Pod. Hit us up on Instagram.
We will repost you. We'll repost everything.
We will repost and we will answer you. Instagram, Psych Effect Pod. We're also on Facebook now. We are on LinkedIn too.
We're on Twitter.
And YouTube. YouTube coming soon. We will, at some point soon, show our faces. Because I know that's exactly what you want, is to see our faces. Anyway, it is Mental Health Tip of the Day time. So, the mental health tip of the day today is, I get asked a lot in my office if it's possible at a certain age, when you're a little older, whether or not you can actually change your personality. And the answer to that is yes. Yes, you can. And I don't know if this is so much of a tip as an answer to that question. But the way you do that is you have to accept the fact that you are ready for that change. So I guess the tip is, if you do want to change, you have to accept that you're ready for that change. And I think that is the hardest thing for some people to do, is that they can change. Because after a certain amount of years of life, 40, 50, sometimes 60 years, and usually it's at that age when I get this question, you've had 40, 50, 60 years of practice to be the way you are. It's not going to take a month or 2 or 3 or 4 or even 6 to 8 or 9 months to change that behavior. It's going to take a really long time. But if you put in that effort and you put in that work and you choose to be different, you can actually make that change and change your behavior, change the way you view things, and it will come. So that is your tip.
Yeah, I would just say it's not an easy task. Obviously, you kind of said it beautifully. It's not an easy task, and to that end, you don't have to do it alone. You don't have to change your entire life or personality or behavior alone. You can find help. You can go to therapy. Some people sometimes they try to hire a life coach. Those people tend to help you. They won't tell you how they want you to be, but they will help you achieve the goal that you want for yourself. Meaning, if you want to change that behavior, then they'll help you out. And you don't have to go through it alone. That's what I'm going to add.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone. And we will see you guys next time.
Next time we'll see Ja Morant with another gun.
I hope not, man.
I mean, the odds are. I thought I was done with the rant, but the odds are pretty high, right?
All right. No more ranting. See you guys. Bye.
See ya.
The previous podcast represented the individual opinions of Dr. Dmitry Bick, Dr. Stefan de Graaf, and the guests. It should not have been taken as medical advice or an establishment of standard of care. No guarantee is given regarding the accuracy of any statements. Please consult your healthcare professional for any medical questions.